I'm super happy to join today and open this meeting. My name is Orlando Rojas, and I'm professor in University of British Columbia and director of the Bioproducts Institute. And for those of you joining from Canada, what I will do next is very common, or typical, but maybe not for those of you joining from other parts of the world. So the first thing that we do in large gathering like this one is to have a land acknowledgement. So we would like to acknowledge that we're gathering today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Stolo, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. If you are joining from other parts in the world where there are also such communities and knowledge keepers, feel free to put in the chat an acknowledgement to them. It's very nice to recognize their role and the legacy, and also the thriving communities that are growing in different parts of the world. I'm following this very short introduction for 5 minutes or so, and then we're going to have the keynote by Diego, and also we will have a questions and answers with the final closing. And I would like to then start with to introduce our dear speaker, Diego Gomez. He's a postdoctoral fellow in Auburn University, Alabama, the US, War Eagle. Diego is a Mexican-born researcher at the Sustainable Bio-Based Materials Lab from Auburn University. The head of the lab, Professor Soledad Peresin, is also joining. It's quite an honor. Diego's work relates to sustainable use and design of biocomposite materials for water treatment. I have seen his work and I'm very impressed. He also works on biosensors and slow release systems, 3D structures, and of course, he also has a very keen interest in the area of diversity and equity, as well as inclusion. The first time I met with Diego was about 2016, actually. So we know each other since quite a bit of time. That was in the US in one of the ACS meetings. And then I had also the pleasure to host him as a master student coming from Mexico, from DC, to Helsinki, and that was a really a great time, Diego. And I'm so happy that we have continued the contact and the interactions. Most recently, I came to a meeting in Birmingham, and I saw Diego's amazing presentation related to his work. And during the presentation, half of the talk was actually related to the topic that we're going to consider today. So for that reason, I decided, Diego, you should come, you should join us in UBC and BPI and tell us a little bit about your story, your experience. And I think there is so much for us to learn in your presentation. Before proceeding, I want to also acknowledge Heather Trajano. She will be moderating the questions and answers at the end of the talk. And Heather is a colleague of mine here in chemical engineering in UBC, a professor working in the area of hemicelluloses and other very cool topics. She's associate professor and co-chair of chemical engineering EDII committee. With that, I think we're ready to roll. And Diego, you are warmly welcome. Now the floor is yours. I will stop sharing. Also, I will be asking all the attendees to please mute yourselves so that we have an undivided attention on Diego's presentation. Diego, you are warmly welcome. You can go ahead.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction and for the invitation. It's an honor to be here. Let me see if you can see my screens. Can you see them all right?
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, as I was saying, thank you for the invitation. Thank you for all the bioproducts people. Nice to see all acquaintances here also from Alto. And yeah, as Dr. Rojas was saying, I'm currently working in Auburn University. I made my PhD here in the School of Forestry with Dr. Persin, and we are part of the Forest Product Development Center, and more specifically in the Sustainable Bio-Based Materials, right? And we're a pretty diverse laboratory. I'm really proud of that. And part of this and part of my experience has brought me to the attention of how important diversity and inclusion is, right? And how these topics can help us to move forward sustainability and STEM and all the different knowledge that we can be gathering from it. Yeah, so as most of you know, the UN has told us of 17 different goals that they have, these sustainable development goals, and the different focus attentions that we can have. And the goal is to meet most of them or to achieve some of the focus points that they have that are not only about environmental sustainability, but also in life quality and life well-being. And most of the work that we work in the lab is most related to that. And I think it's the same thing for most of the attendees here. However, I think that we need to include in these conversations actors from all levels, right? Not only the government, but also the business and the environmentalists, and also have social representatives. And something that I have noticed is that we need people from different backgrounds and life experience to address these different kind of challenges. So going back a little back of my personal background, I'm from Mexico, and I don't know how many of you are used to this country, but Mexico is south to the US, and we're the first country, if you're going north to south, that we speak Spanish, right? And even if it's the 13th most, with most territory country in the world, we have a lot of difference in between ourselves. Mexico is comprised about 7 big areas, and I am from Mexico City. I was born in there, but yeah, so the capital or the capital district is in the middle part. And because of that, we are pretty isolated from a lot of the other parts. However, we have a lot of nice architecture. We have a lot of the Spanish heritage that we have, but we also have a lot of the native people there, the Aztecs. And I don't know how many of you remember your elementary school history classes, but Mexico City was built on top of a lake. So most of our old streets and a lot of streets that we still have are canals, water canals, and you can use these that are called trajineras, that are small boats where you can have a table in there, and you can go through there and see the different topics in the city. So we have a lot of endemic food, endemic conversation, and we still have a lot of people that speak Nahuatl in there. We have around 68 official languages, so Spanish is not the only one. And well, we try to focus, or we try to pry about the ability that we have of this diversity, right? So as I was saying, part of my family and some of the places that I live is in the south of Mexico. And even if we're in the same country, the heritage or the way that we talk is different, right? The Chiapas was part of Central America, of Guatemala. And after Mexico got split in the north to Texas, and the part of that got annexed to the US, we also have the separation of Central America, and Chiapas was a little bit like Texas, was part of Central America, fight independence, and they got back to Mexico. So Chiapas is really beautiful. We have a lot of natural climates in there. We have a lot of waterfalls, a lot of rivers, and we have this Spanish and Mayan heritage in there. And more specifically, my family comes from a pretty mixed background, from Spanish and Mayan descent. And as you can see, even if we were mixed-blooded, most of the things that we have about this heritage got lost or got erased, because as many places, when they were conquered, they will try to assimilate to the conquerors, to the Spanish folklore. However, in the other side, for my mother's side, the Maldonado side, we come from the narrowest region in Mexico that is called Istmo. And this is a pretty rich region. We have around 12 of the native languages that are spoken there. And in the southern part, when Mexico got independence, we didn't have slavery. So most of the slaves that came from Spain got independent and got located in the southern part. So the people that were from this part, we have the native heritage, the Black heritage, and also a lot of the Spanish and the Arabs that came to live in Mexico. They live in the northern part. And even if it sounds a little bit strange, I'm sure a lot of you know about that. Frida Kahlo was from this region, or her mom was from this region. So all of the different art that you see in here, or if you have seen Salma Hayek in the recent movies, she's also from this part, right? So we have a lot of folklore in the ways that we dress and in the way that we talk. So similarly, my grandparents, my grandmother, she comes from one of these indigenous people, the Zapoteca, and my grandfather is mixed from Mixteca people and African descendant people. So this is a picture of my mother in that, in the traditional clothing. So as I was saying, Mexican is pretty diverse, right? And it's really hard to say what is a Mexican because we are a mix of a lot of things. We are pretty modern, but we also have a lot of pre-Columbian things. We are Catholic, still we have a lot of indigenous traditions, and the way that we speak is always mixed with all of this. And if I put to you this image, it will be really hard to say which one is more Mexican than the other one. I think that we have a traditional stereotype, but as you can see, we're a mix of people. Even in our indigenous or more indigenous people, they don't look the same, and we have a lot of Korean, Arab, and European descent. So even within family, this is my family, this is my aunt, this is my sister, these are my cousins, and even if we share blood, we don't look alike one to each other, right? So defining a Mexican is kind of hard, but I think that that's one of the prettiest things about Mexico, all the diversity that you can find in there. So coming back to my more personal experience in how I grew, I'm from Mexico, as Dr. Rojas said, and I did my undergrad in biological engineering. That is really similar to biosystems engineering. And during that time, I was able to do 1 year abroad in Argentina. So I got initiated to the Argentinian culture even before coming here with Dr. Fersin. Then I went back to Mexico. I did my master's there in material science and in material science, design and engineering, where I was able to go to Guadalajara, that is another region, another part of Mexico. And I was also able to visit and work with Dr. Rojas in Alto University and many of the people that I saw here. And after that, I came here to Auburn to do my PhD in forestry, where we work with the design of natural polymers and the sustainability goals, especially focused in water treatment. So one of the big realities that came to mind when I came here to the US is that we came always, or if you hear the movies and the news, we come to the US, that is the land of equity, freedom, and opportunities. And this is based in a meritocracy. That means that it is your talent, your effort, and your achievement, the things that will give you your possibilities of your life, rather than with your wealth or your social class and background. However, the reality is pretty different than what we see or what we are taught, right? Many parts in STEM, men has a lot more representation and a lot more opportunity than women, and intersex people is most of the time erased. And similarly, it happens with cis, non-binary, and trans people. A cis man has always more opportunities than even a trans man. And then religion also plays a big factor in how economic wealth and economic opportunities are done. Christian people, especially here in the US, have more opportunities and more well-being than secular people or other religions. And your race or your background will also have an impact. White people always have better opportunities, or they are more represented in STEM fields, followed closely by Asian, then Black people, and then Hispanic people. And similar sexual orientation has a big impact on how you're presented and the type of opportunities that you can find and the way that you can interact or develop yourself in these different areas. So with all of this different knowledge, it came to my attention that, well, now I have a lot of more labels to be by than just being Mexican, right? I consider myself an atheist. I'm a cisgender Hispanic, non-heterosexual research man in here. So when I learned all of this, it comes with other social challenges instead of only the research that we are trying to do, right? And something that we also have to navigate is, well, what does it mean, like all of these different areas that, or these different labels that I have attached to myself. And when that I understand them, my focus wasn't what can I do to lift other people, and what I or we in general can do to improve the generations to come, and how to make this better, right? So we will talk a little bit about this. And something that we all have to remember is that STEM, scientists and researchers, we're an intersectional people, is more about, have more factors than always our sexual orientation or our gender. And there's also a lot of discrimination about race, religion, age, and your socioeconomic status. So the first label I want to talk to you about a little bit in STEM is what it means to be Hispanic, right? So we will focus in Anglo-American, that means the US and Canada. And what does it mean, right? Because there are like different realities for both parts. When we see the US Census in 2020, like 18.7% of the population is Hispanic or Latino. And from these people, the ones that will be our undergrads, or the ones that will be doing the STEM work, 25.4%. So that means that 1 of every 4 kids that you see is most likely to be Hispanic, right? However, when you see TV media or all of the other important representation aspects that we have, only between 5 or 6% of the cast are Hispanics, and usually they are side characters, because we only have 2.6% of the main characters being of Hispanic descent. And if we have these people, we mostly fall into certain stereotypes. You are either a cop or a criminal. They focus a lot of what it means to be an illegal immigrant, or you are only the emotional sex kitten, or you are just like a tokenism that you have in there. And that's something that I have also experienced firsthand here, trying to date. Now, when we see the reality in Canada, it's a little bit different. According to the 2016 census, that it was most available thing, only 2% of the population is Hispanic or Latino, and most of them are also Mexican, Colombian, or the Salvadorian descent. And the reality is that a lot of the immigrants that go to Canada are highly educated people. They are more doctorates and masters that are immigrants than Canadian-born population that have these kind of degrees when we get in Canada. And then when we see more closely what it means to be a Hispanic in STEM, here at least in the US, you can see that Hispanic only represent 3% of all the doctoral degrees that are awarded, even if we remember we're around of 18.6% of the population. And even in a bachelor's, we're only 8%. So that means that a lot of these kids are not getting a college education. And these numbers have not changed really since 2010. It has been 12 years, but Hispanics are still around of 8% of the people awarding, while other minorities are increasing steadily between 2 and 5%. And this is because of the visibility that they have had in more recent years. And other of the reasons that we have is that Hispanic teenagers have the highest school dropouts, with around 10%, and 12% doesn't finish a 4-year college program, even if they started it. So the highest dropout in the education system in the US. And when different works have been looking for the reasons of why, a big part of it is a feeling of isolation or otherness that it comes of being Latino, especially in a less populated part like the Southeast. I think that in California they are more visible, but they usually say that there's a hostile climate, and that affects not only their confidence or the ability to adjust to going to college and not living with their families anymore, and that decreases their GPA, that have an effect on the ability that they have to retain scholarships, and therefore they have less persistence in college. And when we see this translated into works, into the workforce, once that you get the degree, Latin people or Hispanic people are still only around the 9% of the jobs. So even if people do get to college level work, most of them don't go to STEM related science compared to other kind of minorities. And when we see the age, this is data from the American Chemical Society. They just released a report of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we see also that Hispanics are around 5.5% of the people publishing in chemistry-related or STEM-related fields. And this trend has not changed that much. We can see that they have been, so this is people that has had their doctorate for 30 years, and this is like the new doctorates that many of us will be. And it was majority white, and then we can see that now a lot of more East Asian people are getting doctorate degrees and are being more active in chemistry and these sustainability efforts that we were working with. So this is a summary of different works and of what we can do, right, to increase this Hispanic retention of this Hispanic presence in STEM. And most of it, we can say that is supporting Hispanic serving institutions. That is something that we have here in the US. They are 411, and they have around 2 million students that are only focused on serving majority of the Hispanic population. There's also that you can all do, you can try to mentor middle schoolers and get new programs for us to educate them and to help them to get good grades and to persist and get into college. And colleges can provide more opportunities for Latin students that even if they don't have a high school diploma, they can get a GED en route, even once that they start college. Also create readiness programs in high school, recognizes the colleges that are doing something for that, because that's really important, and they bring awareness to other universities to do so, and also helping in community college programs. And if we are seeing it as professional or people that are already hiring Hispanic people, it has been shown that one of the biggest things that people can do for retaining Hispanic people is just actively questioning, how are you, being friendly and listening of the things that they have to do, even if you cannot give them a solution. Just having an ear for them to talk, it's really effective. Promoting peer interactions. When you see Latin people, be open, talk to them. We are really communal people. And improving the cultural climate is something that has also been shown to have a lot of effect in retaining them. And even though I'm Hispanic and my primary language is Spanish, there's a lot of indigenous background that we can have, and even if it's not 100% my reality, I also think that this is something important that we can talk. Indigenous people or self-identifying indigenous people are less than 1% of the people that are generating STEM-related fields. And when we see this more closely in Mexico, we have 10% of the population that is solely indigenous. However, only 1% of them are able to go into college. And this is because of the extreme poverty that a lot of them live with. They don't have access to housing, food, health, or elemental and college education in their native language or in Spanish, even if by law, Mexico is supposed to give that. And even if they have the opportunity, they don't have enough savings to go to grad school or to, if you want to have an international experience, it still have a pressing economic impact. And I found this, well, I know this person, Ricardo Pedro Pablo. He's the first completely indigenous people that have been awarded a PhD, and he just got it last year, and he did it in MIT. So even if college is public in Mexico, we have to pay $23 fee for doing the exam to be able to enter. So we think that that's not that much, right? But for him, it took to go to Corp Panhandle and to ask for money so he can able to pay this exam fee. So what I want to say this is like there are still a lot of gaps in this that we still need to focus to try to accomplish before we can get into more challenging things. And another reality is that even if I'm Hispanic and I'm living in the US for the five years, I have a different status that Hispanic-born people in the US, right? And I'm first-generation immigrant. And in Canada, we see that mostly immigrants are the one holding a PhD doctorate. But something similar is happening here in the US. In 2018, there was a study releasing that Mexico and Cuban were the most people or the more educated coming to the US. But even in general, 26% of the Latin immigrants have at least a bachelor's degree. So we're coming mostly to study. And these numbers are being used to narrow the gap in the higher education. So a lot of that 8% that we saw of Hispanic representation in college is not always because we are having more US born people going to college, but it's also because of the immigrants like me. And we're still coming, right? We are the second largest immigrants, and Canada has the second largest number of immigrants in the whole world from Mexico. And even though most of us are fleeing because of violence or low work opportunities in our countries, a lot of countries in Latin America, they have free education. And if we are the first generation of our children, eventually will also impact the STEM presence that we will be having. And changing a little bit of tone, another really important thing that I wanted to talk about is what it means to be from a sexual minority or being queer or not straight. So in the US, the LGBT youth is about 14% of all the Americans, and about a third of them live in the Southeast. And when we see people in the age of getting their PhD degrees that are the millennial group, 30% of them do not identify as straight. So that means that one of every 3 students that you can have will probably be part of this LGBT minority. And as I was saying, in the US, 1/3 of them live in the Southeast area. So it's a lot more higher than a lot of people think, even if we are the most conservative part of the country. And when we see the kids that are going to study or to start college, 1 of every 6 identify as LGBT. And one of the dark realities is that trans people, especially trans women, have a lot of more issues than just being able to go to college. Their life expectancy is only of 35-year-old in advanced or developing countries like the US. And when we see places like Latin America or Hispanic women, that life expectancy is of only 30 years. And about 1/3 of them live in poverty. And similarly, homeless people, around 17% of the under 18 homeless people that are LGBT. And when you see this general statistics, 1 of every 4 teenagers that come out to their parents are kicked out of their house and end up in a homeless situation just because of being who they are. So going to college is not always the first thing that they will have in mind. And this is not that much different to Canada. In 2016, 4% of all Canadians consider themselves LGBT. And when we focus only in the people that are between 15 and 25 years, that are the people that are going to college, we have an 8.6% of them being LGBT. And more than half of the violent crimes in Canada are targeting sexual orientations of different people, with 25 or 40% of the homeless people in Canada identifying as LGBT. So this is another of the big issues why we don't have any representation. And when we see it more specifically to STEM, 7% of the LGBT undergraduates are 7% less able to stay in STEM related. Usually they drop out or they change majors. And chemistry, and that is one of the big backbone science that we use for sustainability, has the lowest retention in all of the different STEM fields. We have between 17 and 21% less representation in the STEM fields in general, and especially men that are gay, bisexual, or queer are 40% more likely to drop out of these programs. And there's not that much information about trans people, but something that we know is that they have the highest dropouts, or they end up not re-enrolling because of the general conditions of colleges. And when we see the aspect when we are working already, more than 0.5% don't feel comfortable coming out to their people, or they are not even comfortable if they are out. And this is not changing between different professions. And a simple thing that indicates this is how when information is collected, the marital status, a lot of times it come out as straight oriented, right? So if you have a house or a husband or a wife, depending, it's more commonly to be asked than any other kind of partnership. So yeah, what we can do to increase this inclusion, being out, if for the people that are self-identify as LGBT people, it really helps to the students and to the newer generation to see that they can be here and that they can be represented and they can do STEM work freely. And this also helps a lot with the retention and the mental health of them. Something that universities can do is open more financial gatekeepers, scholarships, especially for the more unrepresented communities. As we were saying, this is intersectional, so a lot of them can also be in poverty, building peer interactions. And for the professors and staff, you should be able and aware of all the different things that you have available in your campus and how you can help them when you can see them struggling. And this is not the ACS, but the Chemical Royal Society of the UK has also seen a lot of these discrepancies in workspace for people that do chemistry in science. So what they recommend is that colleges must have a welcome community, that we have improved policies, and we have to have training for everyone that is working there, even if they don't identify as LGBTQ. So some final thoughts. I think that the Sustainable Development Goals, as I was saying, not only focus on environmental sustainability, but we also have to focus on equity, and we need to be aware of all the different backgrounds, because I think that they will give us ideas and experiences that will not only light up new solutions, but we can also pinpoint or oversee problematics that they can be having, and we are not aware of them. And I also think that there's a lot of traditional knowledge that can generate new research pathways to address common problems. For example, in Latin America, we have a lot of different teas that you drink depending on what you're having, right? I don't know if you have ever heard of having a teaspoon of honey and lime when you are having a sore throat, right? And this kind of research can always, or this can also help generate new research. But I think that we cannot address the environmental sustainability until we not address some of these social issues. And we'll have to be really aware that to this date, we only have 90 months to do some substantial advancements on these development goals if we want to avoid all the consequences that will come with the 2 degrees global increase in temperature. So with that, I want to acknowledge, first of all, my group here in the Sustainable Bio-Based Material. This is our latest picture. And of course, Dr. Roja and all his group and all of the people in Biomact in the Bioproducts Institute. And with that, I'm open to questions, comments, feedback.